This is Ray Eberling with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Today is February 17th, 2022, and I am in Gainesville, Florida today at the home of, and please state your name.
My name is Waltraud Schmid.
Thank you. So let's get started, shall we? Would you please tell us where and when you were born?
I was born January 8th, 1930 in Vetler. And we always said an der Lahn, which is the river. But today it's just Vetler and a Postleitzahl, your postal document.
And where is Vetler, if you could describe it to us?
It is close to Frankfurt, about 50 miles northwest of Frankfurt. And it is a very old town with a very old medieval town, but it has an industrial part, which is normally sort of the outside on the river fluences, but the water is not navigable. So.
And what were your parents' name? Who were your parents, and what did they do for living?
My father was an engineer for Siemens for over 30 years, and my mother was at home.
Okay. And what were their names?
My father was Adolf Menges, and my mother was Annie Menges.
Okay.
And her maiden name was Rame, which is my address in the email, and everybody thought I had married again. I haven't.
Okay. And Wetzlar was it was a medium-sized town, a small city.
Well, it used to be 20,000 when I was there, but it's quite a bit larger. We had the high school or the Realgymnasium and for the whole area, so the people would come by bus or train. And then when the school closed, they went home. There was no school bus or anything like that. It was a city bus that came.
Did you have siblings?
No, I'm the only one.
You are the only child. Wow.
And there's something that just lately I got to be thinking when I have so much time about my youth. All the friends of my parents had one daughter, and we all born during the Depression. So there were not many, because neither one of the people had a job where they needed help to work at home. So, and I thought, this is interesting. I never thought about it. Here is all the Depression. Well, I was born. I didn't know what's going on. My father always had a job. So.
So, again, that was 1930, so the first full year of the worldwide depression.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any specific memories of the town when you were young? You mentioned a little bit about the school, but playmates, just what the town was like to you as you know, from toddler to, you know, the early years?
The early years, I don't know. I remember about 3 years when my grandmother, my mother's mother, because my grandfather was a brewer, and he passed away about in the early 30s, and I don't remember him at all. He came from Bavaria, and so my grandmother, you know, you didn't have pensions within. She got very little money. So, and my mother's sister, they moved to us. So we all rented a bigger house. And my aunt, my second mother, was 7 years older than my mother. And she told she was the head bookkeeper from a company there and for years and years. And everything, she typed and she did, and she had her office, and, and she was at home, and she had her friends, and my grandmother cooked, and she always told my mother, "You don't know how to do this, do something else." And she liked the garden, and she told my dad which beds to do, and she would put the plants in or whatever. We had a small, the house we rented on the hill had a big garden and a big yard with all kinds of berries, bushes in it, and they had to be taken off. That was sort of, bothersome to me as a kid. I climbed the tree once to get plums out, and my grandmother just had a fit. "What's going to happen?" I said, "Nothing. I can pull the bush and they fall down." But they didn't fall down. You should pick them up. But I had a very nice youth. Yeah.
I'd like to explore that a little more. I did want to ask about your father's side of the family. Were they originally from that area as well? And that's Hessen, isn't it?
My father's father was rector, and he was a teacher. And you advanced and he taught in a one-room schoolhouse. And they had their own animals in the country. And my father had an older brother and a younger sister and a younger brother. There were 4 in the family. And the oldest son died in 1909. He had meningitis, and my grandmother, his mother, I had never met because she died also the same year because she was, you were in quarantine, and that's where. And my grandfather had a big hunting area because he was, teachers were very, very well respected. And there was the society in the small rural area. The teacher, the doctor, if there was one, and then the person who did not the mayor, but it was mostly no nobility who owned the area. And so my grandfather was a historian too. When he retired, he and Hitler didn't see the same way. He was a registered Democrat. His younger son, my dad, was not interested in politics, whatsoever. He didn't like military either. And my uncle, he was a social part of the family, and he was a registered social democrat in the 30s. And my grandfather and his son didn't see eye to eye in that. So there was friction in the house. But he married then and moved in the country too. And he was a teacher. And so when Hitler came, they all had to be party members. So my grandfather was not going to party member for anything. He already was a Democrat, period. And so he retired. And he wrote books. He was an honorary citizen of the area there. And he wrote a big book, I still have it. It's the history of the area. And the area was called Wallau, Biedenkopf area, old rural area with a lot of people who had big land owners. And I wasn't interested with it. I liked history, but I didn't particularly like to know how many sheep and how many this and how many that the people had at that time, and what they did. Well, they had to feed them, you know. So it was sort of funny. I still have read the book to page 12, and it's about this thing.
Yes. I would like to come back to some of the things you said about politics in a few minutes, but I did want to ask, do you remember starting school? Was it a kindergarten?
6, no.
Okay. Right to the first?
At 6.
Uh-huh.
And we didn't have kindergarten for anyone. We also did not have any person that couldn't do things or couldn't walk. We had no kids in the same school. The Volksschule started with 6, year 6. And you got a big thing with goodies in it, and you had a picture. I still have pictures for things. But it was a big day. And that was the only day my mother went to school with it. And my dad, he didn't have time to take off work. So mother had to do that. But there was never like here that everybody who is autistic or those people did not come into the normal elementary school. They were in a different school and with different things. They were in there from whenever they could get there, because no parents worked together. Most parents worked. The father worked. And the mother sometimes cleaning houses or something like that. But she always had to have somebody at home with the kids. And then it started different after the war.
Did your school, was it separated by boys and girls at that time?
No. The elementary school were both sexes together.
Okay.
But once you went 10, you had a girls' high school and a boys' high school. And the high school was not called Oberschule. Well, that was Hitler later on, who didn't like... we were ein Realgymnasium für Mädchen oder ein Realgymnasium für Jungs. We did not have a humanistisches Gymnasium. Humanistisches Gymnasium is Latin, Greek, and one modern language. We had Latin, English, and French. And Latin, in 6 years of it. Also.
So if I understand this correctly, I'd like to clarify gymnasium, which I know is spelled like American gymnasium,
yes,
but it's something different.
It's a school.
It's a school, but is it a school for those who would be more pointed towards university? Or
yes.
Yes, okay.
And you can go, first of all, you have to do an entrance exam. If you don't pass it, it's not you get a second chance and a third chance. That wasn't known then. You stayed in the elementary school until you had to go to school until you're 14. But when you were in the elementary school, you could also join eine Gewerbeschule, which is a vocational school. You could study for being secretary, or you could study for, you did then also a fellowship with any trade, electrician or something like that. You had to go to school and then come to the shop where you were in. First you started to sweep out the shop, but you got to work more and more. I learned how to, not in school, but my dad decided I needed to know how to put a lamp together. Well, and he said, and don't touch electricity. What you don't see, you don't touch. Because you don't know what you're touching. So old lamps I could get together, but the new ones,
Do you remember friends from your youth, or have you kept in touch with any over the years?
I had, yes, but no, not many from my high school class. when we made Abitur, we lost a year during the war when the schools were closed. Yes. They were closed, period. And you just went there and got homework, and then you went there, and when you went there, you turned in the one from the week before. And so I was 20 when I graduated. You're normally 19. You go 13 years to school. And we were 20 in the last class. You could leave when you were 16, too. Besides, high school cost money. It was 20 marks a month if you were one child. If it's 20 marks, and the second one, 18, if you had more than... So you did get, I think, but you had to pay. And it's a public school. It had nothing to do with a private school. We didn't have any private school. We didn't have any religious schools, anything. We had in school religions, the Catholics went to this way, and the Protestants went the other way. And it was in school. The priest came to school, and we had great discussions after the war with both religions. Nobody ever, oh, he's this or he's that. I had never seen as many churches anywhere. And, you know, in Germany, churches, the old churches, belong to the state. They don't belong to the church because they couldn't keep them. There's tremendous amount of money to get a church that was built in 1200 to keep it up. The dome in Cologne is, you know, and it's the same everywhere else. In most areas, the Catholic Church do belong to the country they're in. The old ones, at least. What they build new one is nothing.
And to clarify again, a couple of things. I believe there's a small cathedral, which is dome, right? Dome and cathedral.
Yeah, it's
yes, same.
Yeah,
in your city, in Wetzlar, is there a small cathedral?
Wetzlar.
Wetzlar
is the Cathedrals. Well, that was a French word. I don't know what dome. You see, there were Dominikaner as the Domherrn. We had a well, it wasn't a monastery. It was just a few people that looked after there was no other religion. You know, after the Reformation, whoever was the duke or whatever king of the country, whichever religion he joined, all his underlings were that same religion. You had to have, that was slavery too when you want to. It's just called feudalism.
So in your part of the country, which I believe is northern part of Hessen, it was Protestant, yes, pretty much?
It was Protestant. We were Prussia first.
Yes.
The history is very hard. Everybody said, you never know who, the Bavarians are the one that stayed, you know, for that. And the first one who even made a king or an emperor of Germany was Bismarck. He got them together. Even so, the one who he made emperor, he really didn't appreciate it.
Yes. Well, as you were born in 1930 and you were 15 in 1945 at the end of the war, I would like to talk about that period of time a bit. Can you remember about how old you were, then hearing your parents talk or something about the politics changing during that youth of yours? And could you see differences even as a child happening?
It changed, but, you know, when you're 10 years, by law, you were Hitler Youth.
Yes.
Either Bund Deutscher Mädel or you were the Hitler Youth, the Hayot for the boys. You could do anything. You did not need your parents' permission for anything. Just like here, we are getting there. And but in my family, that didn't work. what my father said was law in our family. And he said, we eat at 1 o'clock on Sunday. And I don't care where you march, which flag you're carrying, you give the flag to somebody else and march home. I said, you can't do that, Dad. Oh, yes, you can. You need an excuse, I write it on paper. I'm in the defense industry.
Because
you
Siemens,
can do things.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to talk about anything political. What we say at home stays in these four walls. Mm-hmm. And what Dad said was law. Even his mother-in-law did nothing against Dad.
Mm-hmm. So when you became 10, you were required to join, I think it was the Bund Deutscher Mädel. Was that it? Or was that the older girls?
No, you could. See, when you're 10, you got a uniform.
Okay.
You bought it. And it was a skirt. Girls never had pants on. You had a skirt. And you had a skirt, and it was buttoned to your blouse, and you had Schlips and Knoten. You had a scarf, and it had a leather thing, and you had a white blouse, and it had which district you were, etc. I liked it. It was 2 days a week, 2 afternoons, and you couldn't get homework. You couldn't get homework on Wednesdays. Saturday didn't count. We had Saturday school anyway, and you had time for your homework on Sundays then. Mm-hmm. But there was no excuses, you know, in school. Oh, well, you haven't done it. And we had an English teacher who did not agree with anything. And most of our teachers had a doctorate. You know, the math teacher had a doctorate. And the education was different. And so, and when you were 16 in high school, you would address with Miss and your name. Mm-hmm. And C, we have a difference between the do and the C. I would have never said to anyone, to my professors, his first name.
Yes.
Even so, I was the older one in here. Yes. And he said, you're a stuffed. I said, if I see you socially, I might. Uh-huh. But I said, here you are the boss. I'm sorry. That's my education. That's the way it is. My son, who got now, you know, he got his PhD at age 56 in mechanical engineering. And his professor is younger than he is. Mm-hmm. You know, he said, my mother was an oldie goldie too. I said, that was my second degree, my second master's degree. It had nothing to do with the first one. I wouldn't even have, you know, you wouldn't look up, you said, out of the lab in Innsbruck, we're going skiing today, how bad? And you saw the professor come, and you always marched back in the lab, and you did your work. He's here, you can't leave. That's not here the way, you know? And it has nothing to do with the age. It has to do, so he said, well, he has an Iranian name, it's this long, Mama, I can't remember that, Professor Mokhadesh or something. And I said, everybody says Said to him. That's his first name. I can't say that. And I said, well, I say sir. And he said, Mike, well, he said, I can't remember your last name, and here you as the boss, dear sir. Mm-hmm.
And you're going back now to your youth
and so. You know, you didn't get a lot of political things in the Wednesday afternoon. That was the history of Nationalsozialismus, yes. And, you know, and you know, well, Hitler's birthday was a holiday, and we have a tremendous amount of Catholic holidays and but the one thing I could never understand was why some people had a yellow star on. And I said, why do they have a yellow star? I don't know. My dad never said anything. And Mom said, they are Jewish. I said, so what? And he said, well, we had friends that were Jewish that left. Yeah. They were smart. And there were people at the university. You know, they said we had a doctor. I didn't know whether he was Jewish or that's not why we went there. Mm-hmm. But he was Jewish and he didn't get out. He said, I'm a German doctor. What's your problem? And that really, and my grandmother was the one, she said, that's going to come back to haunt them. Mm. So, and then the tone changed. You know, you couldn't listen to radio only to a certain station. And when you listened to Radio Luxembourg, that was the Voice of America, they told you where the airplanes were. We had also a station where it told you the airplanes. But you had to run to the bunker and things like that. So things got different then.
Yes, yes. I wanted to clarify one thing because you used the terms do and see before. And could you clarify? I know what it means, but I don't think everybody watching this would know that.
Well, it's a difference between if he's a stranger or an adult, you use the name, but never the first name.
Yes.
And if it's your aunt, you say du, and if it's your teacher, you say si and your name.
Yes.
But even in class, you get told how to do it, how manners are, because the teacher, when you're 16, addresses you with C in your last name.
Yes. So Z being the formal you and du being the informal you.
You don't have it in English.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And that's why you have sir and madam in it. Mm-hmm. But this was my husband. He said, you know, everybody says with his hands in his pocket and talks to the chairman. And he said it was unheard of. Yeah, it was unheard of. That was true. It's different in the culture of the country. You don't do it in England either, by the way.
When you were about 9 years old, and you were talking about the radio and the news for a moment there. When you were about 9 years old and the Sudetenland was invaded, and then shortly thereafter Poland, how did you hear about that, and what did you remember what your parents were thinking about that?
You didn't hear it here like every time somebody sneezes, you hear it all over the globe. But you got certain times it was die Nachrichten, the news, you know. And then we had Oberkommando. You got from the different part of the news was where the military was.
Military news, yes.
Yeah, what it was. And you could get it from Radio Luxembourg sometimes, you know, when the front. Sure. Radio Luxembourg was not in Luxembourg, but it had this. So, you know, when people that tried to get over the border to Switzerland, it didn't work either.
Did there become a time when people would say, "Oh, you're listening to Radio Luxembourg. You should not be doing that," or reported that?
Oh, yes. My mother's cousin's son, you know, he always wanted some. He was a bit strange, in my opinion, but he was much older than I was, and he listened to it, and one of his best friends reported him, and he got into a concentration camp, and they never heard of him again, and that was their only son.
For listening to the unauthorized station. Yeah.
You know, some of these people would send to the military on front, on the thing, but not all people in concentration camps were Jewish. There were many people there that that just did not agree, and you learned to keep your mouth shut. There were times when you were real tempted to say something, but no, that's not your problem. Don't say anything. You know, we would say. And we had mental institutions. There were people killed there. You know, they had dementia or they had something, but they were not part of the perfect race. And I don't know where the idea came from that the race we were looking for is people that are blonde and blue-eyed. Neither Hitler was blonde or blue-eyed. I don't know, I've never seen Himmler. I never seen Hitler either, but you got a lot of pictures anyway. Yes. And you know, in Swedish is not, they're not all blonde and blue-eyed.
That's correct.
Because there was a French, see, nobody knows history. There were a lot of French influences there when Napoleon decided he needed extension. There is nothing really a race anymore, anywhere. In South America, the Indians are out. Okay? You just can't put them in a cage. Yeah. Senseless things.
I'll come back to some of these, but in 1940, you would have been about 10 years old. That is about the time when the London Blitz started and when the British, the RAF, started bombing Berlin and some places in Germany. Do you have any memories of that?
They did, because we did get alarm. In the schools always got alarm before we call it alarm before, and you had time to get home. And well, you know, we stood in the street and counted the lightnings and this and that. We weren't very interesting to the things. And then we had night alarms. In Frankfurt was badly bombed. In Gießen, our neighbor town, it was really in flames. And the reason why, because it was a railroad where you can go to the south and to the west. And all what we transported went by railroad, not by truck or airplane. You didn't have anywhere to land it. And then also when the war with France was over, we had a lot of people going to France, and because it was half of France was on the Vichy, and the other one, and they had a very big subterranean force there, you know. And and you know, then I don't know. People bought things in France, and people, the military, the upper part of the military, some of them, and people that were like in World War I, where at Christmas all the guns stopped. That wasn't anymore. You know, everybody shot whenever they felt like it. And when they got the command, of course. Yeah, this is the Blitzkrieg in my hometown.
Ah.
It has, but the funny thing is a documentary film, a documentary, Die Luftwaffe über Wetzlar, and it is written in '95, almost 50 years after the war, and the mayor of the town said that, and by that time he's not mayor, not Bürgermeister, Oberbürgermeister, because the town has grown.
Yes.
And of course the industry, we don't have any steel industry anymore either. That's with going with yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, you know, the different airplanes and the types, and it's a documentary film. I mm-hmm. haven't read it either. Somebody gave it to me because I'm not very much interested. I had a lot of people when they had, you know, Flak is the Abwehr, Flugzeugabwehr, Flak, and they had stations were like everywhere, and some of my friends were there. They were 16. Mm-hmm. They were older than I. And they, see, even so, the schools were boys and girls schools. We had things we did together under supervision. Mm-hmm. You know, when there was parties after the war, my parents would say, "Who is there as an adult?" And then for quite a while we had curfews, so you had to hurry home. Yeah. You know, and you didn't want to be got by the police. Of course, when we had, later on, when we had Moroccan soldiers, because they changed for a while, French troops, and it was a Moroccan, and he was funny. They went always the Caribbean with a bayonet on top of it, and it was a guard at night, and they go up a curb, up a curb, up a curb, and you could hear them.
Mm-hmm. This is during the occupation?
Yeah.
Later on? And
I thought, yes. And of course you could avoid them. I came home from Gießen, from the university, and where are they? And there are so many little streets. Mm-hmm. You know, you can go, nobody finds you when it's dark. Mm-hmm. So and the whole family at home sat there and said, "Where were you?" I said, "You don't tell me they had a lecture at 12. I took the last train home. We had a glass of beer." That's when I decided I needed to get away from home, and I went to Innsbruck. Yeah. You know.
A couple of quick. Oh, go ahead, yeah. Please.
No, it's. People really did look out when we had a bombing thing. Mm-hmm. Then people looked out when we didn't have any water or something. We had neighbors my parents bought the stretch of land where our house was from, and they went out there. They raised raspberries and all kinds of fruit, and they sold it when it was ripe. But he had been a bricklayer and was retired, and they had a big house. They lived on the bottom, and in the next somebody else, and on top were the other people. So everybody would look after you. They had chickens, and we had chickens. We could have 5 chickens. Our chickens were spoiled. Every night, every chicken sat there and would have been put on the roast. But you know, you helped each other. You went. I only knew when the Kreisleiter, or the stellvertretende Kreisleiter, the one that had the political thing in town, and the daughter went to school with me, and they lived in our street, and he came home at night. And my dad was sitting at the window talking to the people on the other side of the street in the yard, what they were raising and what, and all of a sudden the window closed. See you later. And the window closed. I knew exactly Mr. Nutman went home because everybody else had a watering can and watered because nobody wanted to say Heil Hitler. I said, I know who got home. He had 3 daughters, and I could never understand. We didn't like people that cheated in games, but it had nothing to do with the politics.
Yeah. I wanted to clarify something because earlier you were talking about France, and you said the Vichy. The Vichy was the French government that was run by the Germans, correct? Vichy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to clarify that. Yeah.
Well, they did have a French person in it. It's like we tried in Afghanistan and it didn't work.
Yes.
But there was a lot of underground going on.
Yeah.
So.
And then, as I understand it, the northern part of France, including Paris, was occupied, but much of the southern part was actually not occupied.
Yes.
Okay.
And the one thing is, you could go through Vichy France to Spain.
Ah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Getting back to the war era, and you're getting a little older here into your teens. Were you able to do anything socially? Were you able to go to movies? Were you able to?
Oh yeah, you went to movies. You had to be 16, and I was going to say I was 16, and I'm not a good liar apparently. And they said, I need to go to the bathroom when you're in. So, and when I was trying to get in, she said, you're not 16. And I couldn't lie. So I stayed up. It's, we had, you could go in the front, the first part of any movie was what the military did.
Yeah, they had the newsreel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and so as long as they were in when then the U2 with London, that everybody, but sometimes it fell on something that wasn't London. Yeah. And
do you recall about when Vetler was bombed and how often?
Well, we had the first time I wasn't home. I was this was in July, 44, and it had it was school vacation, and I was with my grandmother, and we heard it, and you couldn't get a telephone call through either. So, but my dad was going to see customers anyway from Siemens, and he came by and he said, oh, it's okay. And I also learned when a bomb whistles, it's gone. Then you wait for the bang. It's the dangerous time is before you hear the whistle. Yeah, that was in November of 44. My grandmother and my mom and I were home. And it was a Friday because we came home from school. And across the street, the house across the street, there was an engineer from Siemens and from Lights, and his wife and two daughters lived there. And the house was built in 1912 by the grandparents. And that's what my grandmother said. But the youngest daughter was 2 years older. It was 2 classes ahead of me. And the older one was 3 classes ahead of me. And we just came home. I had a bicycle. I came home. And we were talking across the street because you couldn't be seen on the street. You had to be somewhere. And then her father came, who was sick that day, and said, let's go down. And we had to build, my dad built a house in 1939, had it built in, we had to build by law a Luftschutzkeller. You know, it wouldn't have done any good.
So air safety?
Yeah, and it was, we had all basements.
Okay.
You know, everybody has basements there. And it had a thicker ceiling, and it had sandbags in front of the windows, because the windows were just outside. You know, you could crawl through if you had to. And it had a Gasschleuse in front. That was actually the Luftschutzkeller was our, we kept the potatoes and stuff like that out there. And then there was a smaller one in front of it. And each one had a huge door that was this thick. And he came with a big thing that had to be opened and shut. So you had to close those 2 doors. It meant you couldn't get any gas in. Even we had no gas in the house. My father was an electrical engineer. He didn't want gas. My mother had to learn to cook with an electric stove. But, you know, we all went. The dog went with us down. We had a little terrier. And you heard this whistle, and it went tremendous scrub. And Mother said, there's nothing left of the house. And she went out to the area where we washed clothes and outside, and the house was okay in the back. I went through the inside and looked through the little window in the front door and saw the house across the street with a roof, beautifully, perfectly kept. The whole house was damaged, but the roof was, it must have been up there. And none of the people were alive, except the youngest one had lost a glove and went on her way home from school. She went to the paper and wanted, you couldn't buy gloves. So she wanted to find out if somebody had found it, put it in.
And she survived. And
she came home and she just stood there. And the ones that first helped to, if anybody was alive underwater. I went over and we had a bunker. At the end of the road was a mountain, the hill, and they dug a bunker in it, you know. And it only had an entrance, didn't have an exit. If the entrance was closed, all the people were inside. And the French prisoners of war were digging that hole. They came, they were the first people who came there. And the first thing I found was a hand. And that did it. Because he was apparently, her father was only found in pieces. And then all the kids were, the younger ones said, please go. The others had only, you know, the lung burst. Never had blood on the ear, but yeah, Ilse was the only one left. And otherwise was nothing in the street. We had no windows up front at all. And so then we get this stuff that is, it's on rolls and is a plastic and has, it's sort of like a screen that is in plastic that you can't look out, but you can at least put them in. There was no one coming and put that in. You had to get it. And the second one was in March of the following year, and we always got it when they came back from bigger things and had bombs left over, like Dresden and things. And we got it on top, and a big stone fell through our roof, and my dad put the inside plywood up, and I found some shingles, and I carried them home, and we got some roof ladders, and my grandmother was absolutely furious. If anything, I said, go in the house. We don't fall off. At that time, I could climb anywhere. So we nailed the shingles back on. Yeah, you had to do some things yourself. It's like here when there's a hurricane. There's so much damage that, and there are no people left to go. I felt for the people in fire. And in Gießen they threw phosphor, and people couldn't get through the asphalt streets. So it wasn't pretty. But it was a war. And everybody blamed us, my husband and me. They didn't have anything in Ravensburg, where he's from. But his father died in 1943 in the Crimean Peninsula. He was a colonel, but he wasn't a military. He wasn't a professional military. He was a teacher. And my dad was the only one because he had a duodenal ulcer, and he was the only one left in the area from the industry, from the bureau they had. So
because towards the end of the war, the older men were getting drafted as well, and the younger boys, correct? Yeah.
So. And there were people killed, later on. I know there was a youngster with a Panzerfaust. That was I don't know, it is a weapon that was developed for tanks. And when that tank came in, and there were 12 of them coming in to town, and they had, nobody wanted to raise a white flag. I said, why not? What are we going to do? Get everything destroyed, which is pretty in town? And you can see the cathedral is a perfect point to put your gun up. And they came up, and that guy decided he shoot the first Panzer. Well, he did. And the other 11 turned and got out, and then we got the barrage in the city. So then they decided it was a good idea to go up on the tower and get a white flag out.
Which force was this? Were these Americans coming in at that time? Okay. And did they, when Germany was separated into sectors, occupation?
Yeah.
Was your area American?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Please continue.
Yeah. And who the nicest people in the American forces were?
Who's that?
The black people. They were the ones who drove the ships, and they got the coffee. They threw some people out of a house and had a point in the street up on top. They wouldn't take our house because it didn't have plaster on the outside. We weren't allowed to do that. And so they would share their 1 cup of coffee with everybody on board. Yeah. And who were the nastiest one were the Jewish people. They were the officers of them. And I could understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But still, there are some traits in human that isn't, they would help anybody anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, you can understand. And when we went to America, my husband and I, boy, the Austrians didn't like it. Even so, they had some people at Cornell and from the Chemistry Institute in MIT. But they said, are you staying here? And Gerhard said, I stay where I like it. And I can get a job. Yeah. So, the only thing he always said, you never get a home country again, because you're always you're always the immigrant here. But it has so many good things that you are a foreigner. That's, I didn't become an American citizen till 1989. And that has nothing to do with America. It had something to do, I'm an only child, and I had inherited from home, and I had a house, and my mother always thought I would come back, especially when my husband died. And I said, my kids are here, my grandkids are here, Mom. I can't come back. I can come and visit you. You go all over the world. I said, yeah, for 3 weeks, And so I felt bad. You always sit between 2 chairs, and it wasn't. But I do understand the people that leave the country because their work. They don't get money from nothing. And it was in Canada. They created all the nasty things from Germany. They created in the post office. They sat there and ate. I have time off now. There was a whole thing full of people waiting for it to get served. I mean, he may be hungry, but you should have somebody there. Edmonton is a big town.
You're in Edmonton.
Yeah.
Edmonton, yeah.
And yeah.
Go ahead.
It's amazing to me.
Could I talk a little bit about, the war's ending in 1945. You are 15 years old. So there was a period of time when did you already know your future husband? Did you meet him at university?
No. I met him at the university.
Okay.
In Austria.
Oh, which university was it?
In Innsbruck.
Innsbruck, yeah.
Leopold Franzen's university. He was an emperor sometime, I don't know.
Yeah.
And and when we get Austria annexed to Großdeutschland, and then my family, my father, my mother, and I went to Austria on vacation. And you drove along the street, and the Austrians are different from the Germans. Oh, the Germans have to work, and they have to do that this way, and they have to do that. The Austrians, just take it easy. We're going to get there eventually. And, they had big big signs on the road. Wir sind eure Arbeit über gebt uns unseren Schuschnigg wieder. Schuschnigg was the minister president. You know, that was up. And we don't like your work anymore. Let Schuschnigg come back. So they're always in debt for something, but it doesn't matter to them at much. You know, it's like over there, we all, let's go and do something else except not chemistry. Well, I said, but we have to finish it here.
Oh, so were you in chemistry or were you in pharmaceutical? Or, you were in university for pharmacy?
Yes, I'm a magister pharmacy.
Magister, yeah.
Yes, and
Master.
in the next morning, after it is in the paper, the next morning I got my 2 semmels in the grocery store down there, and I've known the man for 4 years, and he said, "Here it is, Frau Magister," and I said, "Where did you get that from?" "The paper."
And were you married by then, or you were?
No.
Okay, but you knew him, and he was majoring in chemistry?
Yeah, he was majoring in chemistry, and he went to 1 year chemistry to Vienna because the organic chemistry was hard in Innsbruck. Brettschneider was one of those people who everything has an answer, and until you have the right answer, you're not done. It's like we're looking for the vaccine of human stupidity, and we still haven't found it for 4,000 years.
So, did you marry there in Austria or in Germany?
No, yeah. And I had the idea, you know, because he lost his brother, he lost his mother, he lost his father, and he just had his 2 sisters. And I said, they were Catholic. That area was Catholic. Yes. Even so, he never went to church, but that wasn't my problem. I did go to all kinds of churches because they gave fantastic sermons. I may not have agreed with it, but that had nothing to do with it. They weren't good. The Jesuits can talk. And then he said, I worked in Frankfurt in the pharmaceutical industry there. And there was a church, Catholic church, next to where I lived, and you rented 1 room. You couldn't find an apartment for anything. So, so I talked to the priest, and I said, you know, I am not Catholic, but my husband is, and I'd like to have a short cemetery in the Catholic Church. Well, I was told you can either marry in Catholic Church, you have to marry first. Okay, but you also, if you have children, you have to raise them in Catholic faith. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I don't know and I don't believe that's all of it. So I will be honest. And he said, well, I appreciate your honesty. So, and when I told my husband that, he was furious. Why did you do that? You know I don't go to church. I don't know. I said, well, I thought, no. I still remember my dad telling the minister in our church when he came and wanted to collect. See, in Germany, everybody pays church tax from your brutto salary, so many percent. When I worked, it was 7%. I don't know how much it is. And the ministers are paid by the state. They are state employees. Always were, before Hitler. Had nothing to do with Hitler. And so, you know, the minister came and he wanted to know how everybody was. Well, they made visits to me, and he said, and he needed, the new church needed some bricks, and that's when Dad said, you know, When I build a house, I had paid for the bricks. And I don't get taxes. I work for the money. And I pay church taxes. And that's it. My mother was furious and embarrassed.
When you decided to emigrate, was that Canada first or the United States? And how
No.
did you decide
The
to emigrate?
United States came first because my husband had a postdoc at the University of Texas.
Ah, okay.
For 1 year.
Okay.
58, 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
We're still here.
You're still here, okay.
Yep.
And
then there was a rule here, 1955 rule, that if you get some scientist visa. I was just a visitor. I had a visa every 6 months, had to be renewed because it depended on his contract, and we had to be married. So we married. In Germany, you have to marry first. You can't marry in a church only.
yes.
You know, you have to marry at the Standesamt, which is a state, secular thing. And you go there in the morning, and then you go and get dressed up for the. But we went in May, 16th of May, because the visa needed to be in. We were leaving in August. And in the 26th of July, we were married in my hometown in church. And so everybody asked, why are you going to America? And I said, truthfully, that was it. Well, my parents definitely expected me to be back in a year. Well, Dr. Hackerman said, it's great you brought your wife along. You can't do anything in chemistry in 1 year. And watch football, that is not possible. So you get for 4 years, you get it renewed. And he didn't know what he wanted to do. He knew he didn't want to go into industry. He could get a very good job with his visa, changed anything in at any industry. But he said, they told me what I need to do, and I know what I want to do. So he, the Ford Foundation said, I don't know whether we can change your visa, but we try it. So, and he waited and waited, and the time, and then the chairman in Edmonton at the university had offered him the postdoc, and it was an assistant professorship, and we would be immigrating in 2 years. Well, okay. And then in Canada at that time, you either were British or Irish or anything but, you know, but Canadian. I know his boss said, and Bob said, I'm Irish. I said, where in Ireland are you coming from? Oh, I was born in Vancouver. I said, where did your father come from? From Vancouver, but he's Irish. It's O'Brien. And I said, well, you're Irish several times removed. And I said, I don't know, I don't remember from anybody. I know my grandfather had relatives that went to America because there are a lot of Mengeses all of a sudden, even in Gainesville. But, you know, my husband first wanted to go. He has a, what is it? He had a certification for speaking Portuguese and Spanish. And he did that in Austria, and he spent 6 weeks in Spain just traveling. But he had the idea when you go to a country, you ought to know at least part of the language, because it is impolite if you figure out you speak your language and the others sit there and don't know it. So, and if that's their country and you choose to go there, you ought to know it. It's not like you travel there. Mm-hmm. And so that was his thing. So here he did, he wouldn't speak Spanish to anybody who didn't want to speak English. And he came here from Cuba or wherever. And I said, that's not right either. You know, I'm not in the hospital, then you can't say no. But because, you know, I don't have to speak Spanish. This is not the Spanish. I said, we don't have an official language. You speak, you look at what Medicare sends you, mm-hmm. what you all can speak. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did you get to Gainesville?
Well, and then we were in Canada, but it was cold in winter time. You know, very cold. Yeah. And we had a folding boat, and we went in June to one of the lakes around it. And everybody was sitting there and having, we had it in bags in the car. Mm-hmm. And he said, wonder why nobody is on the lake. And I wonder whether they have no boats. So it turned out under it was this high water, and under it was ice. And he said, I don't think we want to stay here. So in winter time, you had shovel snow, mm-hmm. and you had to have a heater for your motor in the car. You had this thing. Nobody believed it. When we came to Gainesville, what do you have out there? I said, it's from Canada. Huh, never seen it before. I said, well, you see it now. It works. And in the university, when he took the car, there were only so many parking spaces that had a plug-in. So you had it so long there, and then you say, whose car is that? I can plug it in there. So he said, it's not a viable thing. Our garage did not have a door that went this way. It had a door that you opened. And when it was thawing during the day, you had a hump of ice underneath it, and you had to have an axe for before you could get in. No. So then he talked to Hackerman. He said, Hackerman said, why don't you come back to Austin? Because he had a company there too. Mm-hmm. And you can go there and we'll see. He's the chancellor of Onegin. And then he got from Laramie and what other one was Oklahoma, mm-hmm. one of the universities.
These are all offers?
And Florida. Mm-hmm. And so he asked Hackerman. He went to Laramie and he said, do you hunt and fish? And he said, I don't hunt, but I fish. Oh, it's great in Laramie, at the interview. And he said, well, how much money do I get for lab? That's more important. And well, the hunting is good too. And he said, you know, I don't hunt. But, you know, they were on the climate, on the hunting and fishing. And he said, I don't know whether I didn't speak right or what, but I wasn't going to go there. And Hackerman laughed when he said that. And then he said, take Florida. it's nice and warm there. Oklahoma is, I don't know. And well, he went to Oklahoma, and they were somewhat busy, but he said they're very, I don't know. Well, anyway, we ended up here with Dr. Sisler. So, and then he called. It was January when he went to an interview here and gave a lecture. And he said, "You will not believe it. They heat their backyard." I said, "They what? What did you drink?" And he said, "I didn't drink anything yet. We were at Sisler for a party, and they heat their backyard, so the oranges will not."
Ah, okay, yeah. What year was this about?
That was 64.
Oh, okay. So you've been here since 64.
Yeah. And then we first went to Austin for 3 months to fill in there. And then, and then we went from there, we went here.
And let's talk for just a moment about, you got here in 1964, this is 2022. Gainesville and the university has changed a bit, has it not?
Very much. Very much.
How so?
Well, first of all, you could park 2 cars there. It was $5. But you weren't supposed to have both of them at the same time there. But it was zoned, for Zone A in front of chemistry. We had barracks around still there. And, there were lots of things going on campus. We didn't have the Phillips Center, but we had it was
we had the
university gym where you sit, where the
yeah.
Winnipeg Ballet danced on tables. I just held my breath when they did that beautiful there. And when the director from the concert, when somebody had Coke bottle and pang, 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 it fell out, they stopped a minute and he said, "When you're through, we'll stop. We'll start again." They had beautiful things here. Yeah. Kabuki theater, and that was student. Mm-hmm. And we had some demonstrations too. We had some professors sit in the middle of 13th Street,
And did you say you knew Samuel Proctor? Or
I knew his name.
You knew his name.
But
okay.
I never seen
Okay,
him.
so you weren't. Yeah. Your husband and he were not colleagues or whatever. Yeah. Did you work in pharmacy here in Gainesville?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because before when I worked in pharmacy here in pharmacy, you count pills from a big bottle in a little bottle, and very little chemistry involved. And I taught chemistry for 3 months at GHS. And I'm not it anyway. And I said, and it was an honors classes. And I said, I make it one thing. Please tell me why you cheat. Mm-hmm. Because you're in honors class. And there is no reason why you should cheat. It boils gas laws. It's a very easy algebra. He said, it's for you easy and for us easy who had algebra 1. I said, why you were in an honors class for chemistry if you hadn't had algebra 1? You're 10th graders. Mm. I said, I have kids in school too. Yeah. So it was, I liked that class. So, I really liked them. So
in Gainesville, you pretty much raised your family here then, or?
Well, first the kids were home, and there wasn't much around here to do. We had kids here, and we would sit in the carport and watch the kids ride their bike or whatever. Julie and Woods over there, and there were lots of entertaining to do. Mm-hmm. Can we have a party tonight? I said, tonight? What? Oh, it's just drinks. We're going out to eat to Bivens Arm, there was what was that restaurant there? You could see the water there was beautiful. And that's where we took speakers. You couldn't go as long as the campus was dry, you couldn't go there. And we all knew the way to Ocala and 441, where you had where you bought what do you want, vodka, what do you want? Somebody is going down there and buys booze.
They used to be the Sunday laws in Alachua County.
Yep, it was a tri-county.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. Should I have asked you something I failed to ask that you wanted to say about your life, or your
so
thoughts?
far it was good. The last years, for 40 years, my friend and I have traveled. My husband was a sailor. I like to sail, but I don't like a sailboat like this. I like it like straight, and then you don't have too much wind. We had first a motorboat and a sailboat, and the motorboat was here, and you fell over it practically. Well, he built it here, and then he said, one day he was up with the sailboat, and I was home, and he said, is it okay if we sell the motorboat? I said, you want to have it now? Come and get it. You see, we pulled it. We didn't have it on, and then we had to have it on a trailer if we stuck it here. It was in the marina, and I said, you can't have in 2 marina places. I'm sorry. So that's why we ended up with land in Crystal River in
Crystal
14
River.
days.
Yeah.
Come on, let's show you. And I said, well, I have one of our friends, he said, I'll pitch in, you buy it. Then we build a seawall. My husband didn't know something you can't do if you have the right literature and the right things. And I had never built a seawall. Have you ever built a shore wall on a seawall in water? The water has to be low, because otherwise the seawall is not out of the water. We have more concrete behind the seawall than Fort Knox. And then he had said, I'm building myself a shower down there. So he built shower. This is when the neighbor and he built that for the mailboxes, this thing. And somebody ran into it the other day, and my neighbor said, I put it back up, and I got some concrete, and I did that all. But if it isn't right for you, I'll get a mason. I said, Laura, that was built by a professor from agriculture and another from chemistry. They had no idea about it either. So it's fine as long as it stands.
Well.
And I have great neighbors. I always had.
Well, I want to thank you.
It's an interesting neighborhood.
Yes, I can imagine.
It was.
And your life has been most interesting. I
it has.
really want to thank you for telling your life story.
And found out when my friend and I traveled. We started in 1978 with a trip to India. My husband had somebody working from India, and his niece came, and she was a chemistry professor in Jaipur, Women's University. And so she said, you need to come. And so the two of us went. And it was an interesting trip. And so, and Beth works at Chance, and she's a med tech. And she cut her, and her 2 kids went to Hawaii to see their father. And we drove first to Macon and got the kids on the airplane, and then we drove to New York to get on the plane. But it was interesting. And you see other people live in other cultures. It is interesting.
Yes.
And the British, with all these things, they have done something very well and something very bad in India. But you know, the Indians' time is not anything they're interested in. Yeah, British would say. Yeah, Gerhard knows what time is. I said, well, if you have a watch, you know what time it is too. She said, not in India. Yeah. We flew with a ticket from New York. The ticket said Delhi. And from Delhi, another one to Jaipur. Well, we had looked at the map, never been. Well, we flew. First of all, the plane was supposed to leave at 8:30 at night. So, and the plane was nowhere in sight at 8:30. Mm. It came in at 12. And then it had to be cleaned, and we had to get in, and it left about an hour later. And on the way over, they must have braked. Normally you catch up this way. No, we got to London, and you know they had these signs that roll over then when you got off the plane. There was nothing that said go to Jaipur. Or it goes to Delhi even. So Air India, we chose Air India. And I said, that was not a good choice. Because when we got on the plane then, and they left, and he said, well, Air India will take care of you, no problem. See, I had no experience with colonial talk. They saw always it's no problem, because by the time they get there, somebody else has to take the problem. Mm. And then I said, well, how long will it take? And he said, oh, well, we will get there. All right. So we got there. I thought we were in Delhi. Everybody got off the plane and found out we were in Bombay. And I said, is it going to be refueled? No, this is our engine. I said, here, that's the ticket. Mm. And he said, oh, well, sometimes we go to Delhi and sometimes we go to Bombay, depending on the passengers. And so I said, how do I get to Delhi now? Anytime, any Indian Airlines, it's now the domestic one. So Bev said, they're going to throw us off any plane they get. I said, Bev, we're in a different country. So we went, first of all, everybody was gorgeously dressed in saris, and here we wear our pants. And well, I went to one, and she stood with the suitcases there. And I said, would you please call Dr. Tsuchi and tell her we're not going to be there at the time. I told her, okay, Air India is taking care of it. And so one said, we are flying to Delhi via Aurangabad, Udaipur. I mean, it was a whole Puma. And I said, are you coming to Delhi? Oh, we're coming to Delhi. We're coming to Jaipur too. I said, wonderful. So every time you got to, I didn't know all these little things, where the Maharaja's airports, but then they lost their privy purse. They're all now the airlines. And Bev said, they're going to throw us down. I said, just wait till you're down. You can't jump. And so we got to Udaipur. We must have been the last plane for the siesta time, because it closed all the doors behind us. You don't have any money that you can call somebody. I had a phone number. So I said, I'm going to have to talk to that guy there and make him call Suchi. And he said, yeah, he would give me a token. I said, I need somebody who dials me this number. I don't have any rupee. So we got her, and she said, where are you? I said, at your airport. But the doors are closed, and just a water buffalo outside. And the last taxi left. She said, stay there. I said, Carla, we're not going anywhere. So we stood there and watched, looked at the traffic. Well, and so then she had bought the car here, and it had the steering wheel on the other side. You know, so we have the right one. And so I was sitting in the front seat, and I got smaller and smaller. There were huge buses with people on top of the bus. And I thought, if they fall down, they hit something. But I got smaller and she said, oh, you're so tired. I said, no, I'm waiting for the bang because you're driving on the wrong side of the road. And she said, no, that's the right side here. Mm-hmm. It's interesting anyway. Yes. We flew to Nepal, and everybody, we bought some bourbon in the store there, and it was real bourbon. It was not soapy water. And when we came back, everybody wanted to give us a taxi ride if we paid with a bottle.
Well,
who to get? Oh, I just wanted you to show you my hometown when it was nice. See, this is what you see. This is the river.
Yes.
And this is the cathedral or the dome. Mm-hmm. And it is a very nice town.
Yeah. I've been near there, but not there itself.
But
yes.
But you never get a truck into downtown, into the town. Sure. Because the streets are much too narrow. I wonder how the people from Reichskammergericht do with 6 horses or through. But nobody else was on the street. Sidewalks are about this big. Yeah. And you have to make yourself small. And there's only one time when the business, because most of the businesses are still down there, when they can load and unload. So, well, yeah, it was nice.
Again, thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. This has been a most enjoyable visit.
Yep.